I'd be down to go to a bar called the Boardroom, although I spend enough time in here as it is.
Yeah, but what's the place that takes me to alcohol and range?
I'd be more inclined to come.
That's a different kind of board.
Yeah. I like that.
Kind of nice though. Kind of low key, relaxed.
How was your weekend?
It was good. How about you?
Good. I had done a bachelor.
Oh, survived.
I did. I think I put you down a couple, but here.
Oh, no, I'll just go down there.
I can rearrange.
Oh, don't.
I just guessed mostly.
I'll just go over here. No problem. That's a lot easier.
Oh, I just got out of putting his trust in me.
All right. How's your dog? More importantly.
He's doing great. Very good. He got a bath this weekend,
Oh.
so he's smelling nice and looking handsome.
Steve, where's chairs?
Yeah, some of the chairs are.
They're bad.
They
Every one of them's bad. You sit on it and you
just sit, yep. Times I'm in my
can't even
office.
see over the counter. I need a pillow.
My chair will sink in my office sometimes, and I just gotta fix it, and
Try this one before anybody shows up.
yeah, if I'm the best one, no one's gonna take it when somebody's sitting in it.
New chair for Michael.
Oh, I know. They're all the same. I think as they get older, they wear out and they just kind of. And the microphones, oh my gosh. Are they not the worst?
I didn't yell out, we must be able to have this. I never need a microphone, I didn't yell.
Well, no, you've got a good tenor, or is that the right word, to your voice, that you can hear you no matter what. Yeah.
That's my drum instructor calls.
I mean, we're all
That's all right.
little different places today.
That's fine. I'm looking for my name.
You're probably down here.
I have it then, I haven't been able to find what you're looking for, I didn't see anything in 21 or 20. I can talk to Jake.
Imagine, I think I want to deal with them some more. They don't give us any bill, and they give us work.
Yeah, so I can talk to Jake, but I didn't see anything in 21 or 20,
It's weird.
so.
Okay, well, thanks for checking.
Yep, you're welcome.
Do you think it's down here, sir?
I think so. Cause I went the other way.
Yeah, it's way down here. Okay.
Okay. Well, this has been a very weird day. Let's see if it continues.
No, it was weird for me also. It was challenging.
Oh, no, it's a Monday.
How many things will be done? Oh, this-
Science.
Don, I grabbed yours already.
Hey Donna, how are you?
I am doing fine, trustee Kaminsky. How are you?
I'm good. It's Terry, not trustee Nancy.
Thank you. That's good.
Okay.
As I already mentioned in tweets.
Yes.
But that's really sweet of you now.
Okay, thank you.
Where am I sitting?
Yeah, you got.
And which chair works?
Well, I've gone through three of them. But I've worked mostly on that end.
Okay, this one's good.
This one's pretty good. The first one I tried, I couldn't even see over the.
Brian, I'm not a short person.
Hi, Donna.
Shelly, hello, how are you?
Good, and you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Lots of paper, some big notes tonight. Once these are full, I'm going home. Oh, that's, actually, I'm saving those for those short.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I saw the agenda. thing going.
It's gonna be a long one, yeah.
Good evening.
All right,
That's a great color on you.
are we ready?
Oh, good.
Body is their best.
Yeah.
On air, we're already broadcasting.
Look at that.
Good afternoon. You were looking to the right.
I'm leaning to the left, leaning to.
We good? Am I ready to start? Okay,
I'm okay.
I can wait.
Hmm.
I think you said the first. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long, that whole development direction, that's what. For whatever reason. We're probably chairing the next public works meeting. I'll be on vacation.
We can do that.
I don't know how that
As long
works.
as we,
You Get appointed or,
I think that's how we usually do it, yeah.
you know, the
As
person
long as
that
we
can.
get,
And I'm gonna suggest to Dean, because another person can sit.
yep, our academy do that a couple of times on
I was
GPS.
gonna suggest it to Dean that you might find somebody, because it's gonna be an agenda. You know, the utilities, sewer advisory thing that we're going through tonight. And that whole subdivision road, that's all.
Yeah.
He probably not.
What? Did you plan this vacation?
No, I didn't, honestly. In fact, I felt bad. I wanted it to be on the agenda. It was on the
It
agenda.
was on the
And
agenda.
that lead guy took it, he called me, texted me and emailed me to take it off. So his kids had something going on, I. I was hoping.
Okay, we good now?
I think so.
Matt's just fixing.
Fixing the
We're always
audio.
fixing-
We're always fixing that. Absolutely.
Audio.
Audio.
Doesn't sound like it's overpowering.
Full-
The volume, I said, doesn't sound like it's overpowering, so that's good. Something.
Everyone's here, right?
Yep, everyone's here.
So here,
Our board is here.
Let's wait a minute for Matt, but yet.
Yeah, so remind me, the board, we talked about just changing, instead of creating a whole new thing, for salaries for.
Yeah, we're actually.
Yeah, that's what I said, but we didn't, we kind of talked about saying, we should just, the new hire should be.
Right,
up.
so this is actually.
Okay.
I'm ready whenever.
okay.
Yeah, refresh our memories.
Oh, sure. You just didn't want to be the one we were waiting for.
He was trying to help.
Is it on?
All right, I'll call this meeting of the General Government and Finance Committee to order at 6:34. At 5:34. Got to adjust my time in my computer. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call, all members are present. And with that, we will move on to citizen input. Is there anyone here for citizen input? And if so, please come up to the podium, and we ask that you keep your remarks to approximately 3 minutes.
On the sheet tonight. Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. I'm very glad that an engineer has been found and that we no longer have to be spending $6.5 million over the next 3 years on outside consultants for engineering. But my question is, why did it take an outside person to find this figure? And perhaps there are other departments where there's too little self-performance occurring for work. I'd like to know if any studies of other departments for overuse of outsourcing has been done. And if not, I'm asking you to ask the administrator to produce that study for each department. $6.5 million, that's outrageous. Every contract should be rebid by the end of the month in preparation for the committee of the whole. That would include services such as attorney, IT, cleaning, building inspection, stump grinding, whatever it is. I'm glad that planning and zoning is expecting a downturn in development because there's been actually too much rapid development, some of it not so great. But it's a little late for the $6.5 million. Thinking about that money, much of it was probably pumped into the TIDs, which has inflated them by that amount. And so not only has that money been spent, but it is inflating the eventual tax levy assessment for the future, which is kind of shocking to think about. The 2022 annual report is to be discussed at the village board later tonight, which is good. It's not posted on the site yet, so I'm wondering when that will happen. Switching gears, The escrow boundaries should be updated per the discussion that was held last year with the residents of Woodside and nearby households for the well, number 12. I believe there was a different boundary that was drawn up as part of the discussions from the original agreement. And per the discussions, a minimum of $100,000 should be set aside in a separate account for any problems associated with the wells for those residents. Those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Else coming forward?
Scott Heffley, W159 N10514, Old Farm Road, Germantown. I'll echo a couple comments Melanie had. I'll be brief, but yes, getting an engineer is a big deal. And we've been without one for a couple months, let's just say, and even longer, but we need to keep hiring. But I mean, one is not enough. We were told by our specialists that we need 4 to 5 people. So one's a start, and let's go from there. But I like the fact that we're discussing it later tonight. Everybody knows it's budget time. We have a big deficit. We were told 900. I told you it's higher. I'll explain why some other time. And we have a big deficit. Until we deal with the deficit and face it head on and fix it, I know all 3 superintendents that we're discussing related to getting paid at a higher level. I know those people personally, okay? And yes, we need to make sure that they're paid at the correct level. But I don't think we can do it now when we're not sure how to close a hole in our budget. We will address it. We will deal with it. We will likely do something, but I think we need to wait until after we find out where we're going to close this hole of 900 up from there, 900,000 in the minimum, probably higher, because we don't have the money to give to them, even though I'd love to. We can't just do things until we know where we're at with the budget. The well protection escrow funds, and Rick Miller, Trustee Miller, I know that it was brought up as part of when you ran for trustee, and you said you were going to look into it, and I believe that you did. I'm happy this is on the agenda. I want to know what the plan is, because those residents deserve to know what they face. And just to assume nothing would ever happen, I think, is foolhardy at best. Okay, wells have run dry in this village before. Go ask some old people, and you'll learn. So I think we should pay attention to it. I know we're going to see a budget presentation tonight. I got to be honest, and this is nothing against Matt or anybody else. I can't learn anything from the budget. I probably spent 3 hours on this information. I can't figure out where we've been, where we're going, and what's happening, all right? And that's troubling to me with a degree in finance and 25 years in the financial world. I can't figure out heads or tails of where we're going, because the information, honestly, is incomplete, okay? I don't know how you all can make decisions with incomplete information. That doesn't work in the private sector. It really doesn't. So we need some different numbers. We need trend analysis, 3 and 5 year. How do we get to this point? Light item detail. I won't make these same comments at the village board. Of all people, you 4 need a list of cuts by department. What was decided to be cut? Why? Where they were, where they are, and then you make a recommendation to your other friends on the village board about, you're supposed to be the experts and the specialists. That's why you're on this committee. So I would like you to find a way to look into it more. And I know, Rick, you have an accounting background, so you know this stuff as well, very much about this. So in the drop-down menu, there was account registers. I don't need to look through every single check the village writes or brings in. There was 100 pages of transactions related to that. That's not budget info, guys, just saying. The final one, something near and dear to my heart, you all know water utility, I like water utility. I look at the 2023 budget and it says, maybe this is wrong, it says we stand to lose 1.465 million in the water utility for 2023. Now, could be a wrong number, it could be early, but that's news to me, and I sit on the utility advisory committee, so I don't think I like that. I'm sit on the commission. This is the first time I was made aware that we face a $1.4 million deficit in the water utility. I would like answers, because I feel stupid being on the committee and not knowing this. And that is after a 68% increase in water rates that went in effect first quarter 22. And that resulted in an increase of over $1 million in new water revenues just in '22. So where is this money going? What is it being used for? I don't know if it's debt service or whatever, but I like answers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else wishing to come forward? All right, if not, we will move on to approval of the minutes of 8/21/2023. I have a motion to approve the minutes of 8/21. Is there any comments, questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. With that, we'll move on to unfinished business. Item A, Public Administration Associates recommendations for the recruitment of the Director of Public Works and Village Engineer. With that, we have Administrator Kreklo coming to the podium.
Thank you. And this is, as you mentioned, unfinished business was on our agenda on August 21st. And we've had some conversations about that at the previous village board meeting as well. We have gone through a hiring process for both the Director of Public Works and a village engineer. We were able to find a candidate, a well-qualified candidate who accepted the village engineer position, who'll be on the agenda for the village board meeting tonight for confirmation. I would point out that we only received actually one application for that position. And fortunately, it was someone who was well-qualified and did have an interest in the position. We received 4 applications for the Public Works Director position. However, none of them met the minimum qualifications. There were none of them held a PE, and there was, I think 3 out of the 4 did not really have any engineering background at all. And even if the PE requirement was dropped, would not have been close to meeting the minimum qualifications. Public Administration Associates had presented a recommendation in the past to increase the pay for both the Public Works Director and the Village Engineer positions. What I have in the packet tonight is a memo that gets more specific with those recommendations. The recommendation is to increase the pay range for the Village Engineer from a 6, which has a minimum salary of $83,777 and a maximum of $108,366, which is approximately what the new village engineer is being brought in at. And the Public Works Director would move from a 7, which is currently has a minimum of $97,392 and a maximum of $119,810, would move to an 8. And the pay range for an 8 is a minimum of $107,677 and a maximum of $136,620. So there are 2 recommendations that are before you this evening. One to move the village engineer from a 6 to a 7, and the Public Works Director from a 7 to an 8. We did the recommended budget that is before the village board this evening does include the salaries budgeted within those new pay ranges. So, and it is balanced. So that is included in the 2024 recommended budget and funded.
So one question, the new village engineer that we'll be discussing at village board tonight, he's at pay level 6. At what end? I'm assuming it's at the high end of that.
It's at the very top. So that's why my recommendation is to move that to a 7. His accepted offer was at about 108,000. That's the very top of a pay grade 6. If we move that position to a pay grade 7, it would be at just a little bit under the midpoint, which I think is more appropriate for to bring someone in. So there is room for potential growth in the future.
And thanks. And if I recall, the Public Works Director position, one of the things that PAA had mentioned is that it's at the It's hampering our applicants or our applications coming in
Yeah,
at the level it is right now.
they, PAA had, indicated, and I think we saw this in our recruitment efforts, that it is a very difficult position, profession to recruit people into. It's even in the private sector, talking to different people that I know who are in private sector engineering companies are having difficulty finding those candidates for those positions as well. We've seen actually what we're recommending, one that was recently posted is the City of Whitefish Bay posted theirs at approximately what would be equivalent of our pay range 8. So that is what we are seeing in the marketplace. There's some data that's included in the packet. I won't go through all of that, but unless there are questions, but I think that's consistent with what we're seeing in the market. And to be honest, I think even at this, it's still going to be a challenge to find a qualified individual for that public works director position, but I think our chances are much better. And I also want to point out, I probably should have emphasized this in my memo more than I did. PA is also recommending that we remove the PE requirement from the public works director position. That is currently one of the minimum requirements that we have for the position. We do also have the requirement for the village engineer, and the person who's up for confirmation this evening does have a PE. So that is a policy decision for the board. I think we can operate with one PE on staff. It certainly is nice and would be preferred to have two, but eliminating that PE requirement would open up the position to other candidates who maybe have a lot of public works experience, but might not have that PE.
Is that part of what you want as a recommendation tonight?
That's part of PAA's recommendation, and I did not, I neglected to include that in my memo, but, that is one of their recommendations, and I would concur with that recommendation.
Okay.
I'm
We
confused.
did discuss the PE at the village board. However, the applications were still coming in and it wasn't closed yet, so there was no action that was taken. We wanted that to expire and then take this up tonight, both at GGF and at village board. So that's where we're at. Committee? Yeah, trustee committee.
I'm just a little confused because I have duplicates here. Do you guys have that in your packet?
Well, we're discussing is the director of public works right now. The next one is pay adjustments for our supervisors.
I got two of this one. For the recruitment of Director of Public Works and Village Engineer with two different graphs in it.
There was one was I included the memos from the previous meetings. So there was a memo in the packet that we went through at the August 21st meeting, and then there's a separate memo on the same topic on this meeting.
Okay, very confusing. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I would make a recommendation to, see, we're combining these then. We're just talking about the whole thing. To eliminate the PE for Director of Public Works, and I would also approve the new pay ranges as recommended.
I need a second.
I'll second for discussion.
All right, we have a motion to increase, just to be clear, to increase the village engineer pay grade from 6 to 7, the public works director pay grade from 7 to 8, and also remove the requirement of PE for the public works director.
So,
Trustee Jan Miller.
were we going to say PE, what's the word I'm looking for? Recommended, but not preferred. Thank you.
Yes,
E preferred.
yes.
I just want to be clear on that. And you said, and I, of course, I looked at the village board agenda. We are hiring a village engineer with a PE. And you talked about, he accepted the offer. What did he accept the offer at?
Yeah, 108
Yeah.
approximately, yeah.
366.
Yes.
Okay, so there is no need to change that? It's accepted, signed offer?
I'm recommending that we still change that because that is the very top of the current pay range. And moving that position to a pay range 7, he would then be at just a little bit under the midpoint, which I think is appropriate for someone starting out in a position.
Okay, so then it would be rewritten,
Not the offer.
not
Well,
the offer?
The offer would be the same. The offer doesn't specify the pay range. It specifies the starting salary.
Okay.
So it would
Okay.
not affect whichever direction.
2023, it would affect 2024?
Well, it would not affect the offer that's before that was accepted or the confirmation that's before the board. What you would do if you followed my recommendation would be to allow for future potential growth in the village engineer's salary, in 2024 and beyond.
Okay, and then do we have currently the posting for the DPW director out?
No,
Wait until the meeting tonight.
Okay,
right, it was,
so it stopped on the 6th, and now we have to start it up again?
correct,
And then we'll do the 7 to 8 pay range?
correct. If the village board
If
approves the
approved.
increase, then we will put that into the posting and that'll go out tomorrow.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Is there anybody currently on staff that would qualify if we eliminate the PE?
Um,
I didn't think so.
I think we have, we have 3 very highly qualified superintendents, but I don't believe that they would meet the breadth of the qualifications, and any one of them would meet the breadth of the qualifications that we're looking for in the DPW director.
Right, any other questions, comments? Trustee Myers?
Ladies first.
Thank you.
In regard to the PE, you wanted to have only one of them have it. I thought it was, who was it originally that you wanted?
We'd prefer that both have it.
Right.
What PAA recommended, and I concur with the recommendation, is that we make the PE for the Public Works Director preferred but not required.
So in other words, when it went out for director before, did it have PE in there?
Yes. And none of the applicants had a PE.
And is that a common thing that people don't read what they're looking for the requirements? It doesn't make sense.
We get,
Waste your time.
there's a lot of when we post a job, we get a lot of good applicants. We also get, people who are just filling out an application for the purpose of filling out an application, or who are taking a long shot, maybe don't read it carefully and just submit it in the hopes that maybe they'll, get considered.
I was surprised that the person from Mequon, who was an engineer there, coming to Germantown, something doesn't seem correct. That's just my thoughts because of the pay that they have there per se. But
Well, and the pay scale that they offer at Mequon was one of the reasons we had to go to the very top of what we currently have. This is a promotional opportunity. It's a step up in responsibility and skill level for Mr. Driscoll, who'll be at the board meeting tonight. So I think he looked at it as an opportunity to kind of grow and develop and to take on some new challenges.
thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, questions before we vote? And this is a recommendation to the village board. It will be on the village board agenda tonight. So with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, with that, we will move on to new business. Pay adjustments for the highways, parks, buildings and grounds superintendent, the sewer utility superintendent, and the water utility superintendent. Steve, you're taking this again?
Yes, yeah. And this is an item that as we've been looking at salaries and wages in Public Works, as we've gone through the hiring process for the village engineer and the Public Works Director, it became clear that we should also address the salaries of our three superintendents. The Buildings, Highways, and Grounds Buildings, Parks, Highways, and Grounds Superintendent, the Water Superintendent, and the Sewer Superintendent. All three of these individuals are very highly qualified in their respective fields. All three of them have a great deal of experience, some entirely with Germantown or mostly with Germantown, and others who have been in multiple locations. But all three are well below market, and I think maybe more importantly, for the committee's consideration, all three are well below the midpoint of the pay range. They are all at a pay range that starts at, oops, I'm on the wrong page here. Let me just scroll forward so I give you the right numbers.
Yeah, power number. I hope so.
The minimum for their salary is 75,774. The midpoint is 90,110, and the salary range maximum is $103,061. The three superintendents currently are kind of clustered between $80,000 and $83,000. What I'm recommending is that all three of the superintendents receive a $9,000 increase to their annual salaries, and that would place them all at about the midpoint, which again, I think based on their experience, based on their qualifications, is where they appropriately should be in the pay range at this point.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Make a motion to approve the salary range increase as specified.
All right, motion to approve the salary increases as presented. Discussion, Trustee Kaminsky.
This is a long overdue, and I know we've been kicking this around for a number of months, and it's become more and more serious as we're looking for essentially a leader for the department. Again, I echo everything that our village administrator said. These people have done a great job. They've been on staff, and in some cases for a very significant amount of time, and it's time that we bring them up to the midpoint of that salary range. It's a shame they weren't there before.
One of the things I asked when we were prepping for this meeting is about disparity in the village, and it sounds like we've really addressed a significant amount of the staff already, just either based in changes in position, changes in personnel and position, or effectively looking at those salaries before. Steve, you might want to weigh in a little more on that, but.
Yeah, I think that's correct. And it's been a real challenge as we've seen some, kind of a little bit of a roller coaster here over the last few years, and some, rapid growth in salaries as we've seen retirements and kind of shortages and especially highly skilled workforce. So I think the village board has done a good job of while we haven't been able to do a single comprehensive study, we've been kind of going through department by department. We've addressed some issues in the fire department and increased salaries there. We've done the same in the police department, and this would take care of public works. And I think there's still some areas here and there that we need to try to address going forward, but those are the three biggest departments, and I think the bulk of the salary issues. So I think the committee and the board has been pretty effective at trying to address those salary challenges and try to deal with them as we're able to.
And our 2024 recommended budget also reflects this change?
This is the budget, the salary for these three positions is budgeted at the recommended levels in the 2024 budget.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Trustee Jan Miller.
I'm questioning, I believe that all of these people are most worthy. However, why the 9,000 random number?
Well, it's not exactly a random number. It would place them all at about the midpoint. So this was a way of lifting them all up to as close to the midpoint as possible, while not moving any one of the three superintendents relative to the other two. So if you look at the midpoint for the position is $90,110. With the $9,000 increase, the three salaries the lowest would be $89,020, and the highest would be $92,054. So they're still kind of clustered like they are now, but now at around the midpoint.
And then are we going to be reviewing in the budget other department heads throughout all the departments?
Not as part of the budget, and I think I think the best approach that we can take is, as we've talked about at the board level before and at the committee level, is that it really was not realistic for us to take on a full comprehensive salary study and to fund that all at one time. But over the past 2 years, we've been able to kind of address the areas kind of one at a time, and I think it would be helpful to try to do that as needed and as necessary and as approved by the committee and the board.
Well, aren't we doing some of these? Are we doing any of these salaries in any of the TIDs? Are we funding?
Some of all three of these salaries, a portion of all three of these salaries, I believe, and I'm going to see if my finance director nods back, but I believe that a small portion of each is allocated to the TIDs. Is that correct?
That is incorrect.
Oh, I'm
I don't have any of these currently allocated to any of the TIDs.
Mhm.
The majority of the sewer superintendent is located in the sewer utility. The majority of the water utility superintendent is located in the water utility. And the highway, parks, buildings, and grounds superintendent is located 100% within the general fund.
So I don't get a good grade for my budget quiz today.
That was no, you got the answer wrong. Jeopardy. Anyway, okay, I think that this board should be in the near future looking at superintendents or department heads for all the departments as well. Because as we're talking here, these people have been here for a long time, and we want to continue that longevity and maintain people staying here in the village of Germantown. So how do we make it a great place? They have to be compensated, right? So that answers all of my questions. Thank you, Rick.
All right. Trustee Myers.
Well, I asked, after we had our last meeting, I asked that this be put on the agenda as such. And in the further, I even put down 7,000. That was my first figure. In the process of looking at it a little bit further, I would concur with what you came up with Steve at 9,000. But myself, I want to make a correction from what I've heard. All employees deserve what they should be getting according to the salary. Not just superintendents, but people in charge, everybody. And that's not happening because in the process of looking further into this, I found 3 other individuals who have been here a long time are not at the midpoint also. They need to be corrected this year. Do you have any problems with that after I bring them to attention later on at another separate meeting?
There certainly are things that I would agree that, first of all, that all village employees should be paid, accordingly to their skills, to their experience. Those for department heads, for these individuals, that's a decision for the General Government and Finance Committee and for the village board. And I can take a look at others as well. The challenge is, again, it's easier to bite these off in small pieces and bring them back with a smaller price tag that we can figure out how to pay for it. And, you know, I'm more than willing to bring other positions forward to the committee and to the village board. It's just the challenge is I feel like I should, when I bring it to you, also have a way to pay for it. And that is a little bit more of a challenge, and I'm not sure it's something that it would be helpful to try to address while we're in the budget process. I think that maybe looking at other positions after the budget process is complete would make a little bit more sense.
Are these three individuals going to get this pay raise automatically, not until, I mean, right now, not wait until 2024?
This would,
That wasn't brought up by you this evening, but I'm asking right now,
It
though.
was part of the.
I want to hear it
information in
from
the
him and
packet.
other people so they hear it also,
Part of the
please.
information in the packet is all I'm saying.
Some people don't look at it.
it is, yes, the recommendation would be to take effect in the next pay period.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but thank you also, Steve, in regard to this. Here again, with different employees as such, if they've been here for 10 years and they're still not at the midpoint, there's something wrong with our wages the way they are.
That's really not part of our agenda item right now. And cannot
has
be
to do-
discussed.
I will bring this up at another next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you brought this up last time. See if I have an additional question.
Thank you. Any further questions on this agenda item?
I'm still thinking, Mr. Chairperson, excuse me. Not at this time, thank you.
All right, trustee Jan Miller.
If it is in, if these pay raises are annually and they are in the 2024 budget, why would we be able to, how can we absorb them in the 2023 budget?
I would say with each one of the positions, there have been vacancies that help to pay for these. There are also some areas in each one of the departments where they've spent less than we're budgeted. So the cost for the last 3 months of the year is is only a quarter of that $9,000. So does that make it about 2250? And it's spread across 3 different funds. You have the water utility is one fund, the sewer utility is another fund, and then the buildings, grounds, parks, and highways is part of the general fund. So because of that, I think it's relatively easy to absorb, and I think it's something we can do this year without causing any budgetary stress.
Okay, I did see budgetary stress in the water utilities as well as in our budget. So that's my concern, and I wanted to state that. Thank you.
Right. Any further discussion? Trustee Myers.
I just want to make one other comment. When making up budgets, I believe that the employees' salaries should be considered first, and then whatever else we do thereafter. They're the ones that are going to end up doing this throughout the year for us.
Anything else? And this is a recommendation that will be on the village board agenda tonight. So with that, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, with that, item B, private well protection escrow process, and we have Attorney Sajak coming up to discuss the process.
All right, so good evening. We are at this point anticipated to be about a year from when well 12 goes online. And so as we look forward to process, just as a little bit of introductory background, we've been working on what the potential escrow program might look like. In addition, we have been undertaking some of the other things that have been discussed previously, putting in some monitoring wells that will be in a couple of the residences to measure water levels as everything goes in place. We're hoping to have about a year's worth of data heading into well 12 coming online that we can then kind of use as the baseline for where we're at. So tonight is to kind of highlight where we're at, and then there's a couple policy or procedure questions, specifically as it relates to the escrow that we're going to talk about briefly to get some input, and then look to have a final version of the document to you, perhaps even as soon as next month. So with that, we will talk just going over the basic provisions. You'll recall that the original version of, the original version of the intergovernmental agreement with Richfield said that the escrow agreement would be for any wells within 1/2 mile of the well site. We realized that that didn't work because that's a circle, and so it ended up, for example, cutting off a lot of the properties in that far northeastern piece of the area that you're seeing here. And it also included a lot of either vacant or commercial properties that are on public utilities to the south of the well, for example. So we modified in the final agreement based on input from the board to include basically this rectangular shaped area that is the area that is part of the well protection area. Within that, there are 43 wells that have permits with the DNR, at least that we were able to locate. There are 12 additional wells that there's houses there. We assume that there's a well. We haven't been able to necessarily match up the permit from the state with that particular well. We assume that it's there, but depending on when that well went in, the filing system is not the greatest at the state for these. So you have to kind of look by each individual section and then kind of narrow it down. So it's kind of hard to do. There is one commercial property, which obviously wouldn't be part of the escrow because the escrow agreement within the IGA does talk about it being residential properties. And that's that commercial structure that's on the far northeast or northwest corner, right at the intersection there of Bonnewell and Shadow. Just as a reminder, the fund will remain in place effectively for the life of the TID or until we run out of money within the escrow if we have to use it. Within the escrow agreement, it talks about spending costs or to cover costs related to deepening of the well or replacement of the pump resulting from lowered water levels are the things that we are looking to protect from. So with that in mind, we then talk a little bit about who is covered. And here's where the first couple kind of questions come into place. So clearly we talk about residential homes. Everything in that area, at least as far as we are aware, is a single family home. But the question is, do we specifically limit it to just single family homes? Or if there's a duplex, for example, are we okay with potentially dealing with a duplex? Along the same lines, does it have to be the primary residence of the individual? For example, if they live somewhere else and this is just a secondary home, do we care? And then also whether or not there is, if it's an owner occupant or if it's a tenant, if that makes any difference to us as part of that. It's also the question of whether or not we want to talk to only the current owners as it sits today, or if it would apply to future owners as well. The idea there perhaps being that we've made commitments to those that were in the area that were worried about it specifically, whereas a future owner is going to be buying into a known condition, that they're going to know that those facilities are there, and they might want to do their own due diligence as part of that. Also, whether or not we only deal with currently existing wells. So for example, if there was a new, a parcel gets split off and they put a new house on it and put a new well in it, do we cover that new property as part of this or not? Or if they decide that they want to relocate their well because they're going to, expand their residence, for example, and they can't do that without relocating their well, do we cover that relocated well location? And then lastly, the question of whether or not public water is available or not may be something that we want to consider as well. In other words, does it make sense for us to spend money to repair your well pump if we can just have you connect to the public system and then eliminate the need to deal with the well? So I'm going to pause there and look for any input that the committee might have before we move on to the next section.
Trustee Kaminsky.
Is public water available to anybody within that rectangle?
At present, it is not. We would anticipate that as part of the Richfield Water process, we are going to extend water down Richfield Road. And so some of the properties on that southern edge all technically would have water available to them, at least on the most east or western piece of Rockfield Road, rather, that they would have water technically available at that point. They don't currently, but will.
And that there is a cost involved with hooking up. We all know that. And so my thought on that is we would, if something did happen catastrophically where wells were affected, obviously, I really don't think that's going to happen. It's never happened in the village before. But if we're doing this, it should be an option for them, or we have to pay to hook up that public water if their well goes bad on account of our well, if it's been determined. I think it's our responsibility to get them water somehow, whether they want to dig a new well or whether they want to hook up. But we should pay that fee. That's my opinion anyway. And as far as everything who is covered under there, I personally think probably everything except for maybe, and I might even include a relocated well if that would happen. Current owner versus future owner, the well is the well, the problem is the problem, if there is one. And I think that should go with the home and should go with the well. So I would cover everything I see on that slide, I guess.
Or Trustee Jan Miller, I would say everything on that slide, in my opinion, except for new wells. New wells would have that considered. If, the water levels, current water table, all that stuff would be considered when you're digging a well or relocating a well.
Relocated too, then, probably.
Yep.
Okay.
Trustee Jan Miller?
Why did you say not a new well? Because
I wouldn't cover a new well. If something isn't existing now, why would we cover a new well? That's going to have new metrics, everything like that when it's dug.
Makes sense.
But when wells run dry, can you use the same well and then just go deeper?
That's a new well.
We're talking new
No,
wells.
it's
like
brand
a
new
house was
well.
built and the well was dug.
they're
We're
within
not
the-
talking about the
okay.
cost of us putting in a new well or the property owner
no. This
putting
would
in a new
be
well because of the
somebody
water
puts up
level.
A home and they dig a new well. We're not covering the new well. Or somebody puts an addition on and they need to relocate their well, which almost never happens, but it shouldn't be included, in my opinion. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I would agree with Trustee Kaminsky. We have never, as a village, made people hook up to water, but if we're the cause,
Not true. We make people hook up to water all the time.
what?
We make people hook up to water all the time. There's been, in fact, the most recent one that I can immediately think of was a property up on Mequon Road on the north side. When water went in there, we made them hook in as part of that process, or maybe it wasn't that one, maybe it was the property to the south, but there was one there. There was one property that was just off of the expressway up here that actually, I think we ended up granting a waiver to, where's my water? There's my water guy. Did we maybe that was before you. I think we maybe ended up granting a waiver to that, but we were going to force them to connect based on the availability. We make people connect when it's available all the time. That's just not a true statement.
Well, 2 examples is not all the time. Anyway, if there is, I think that we should be cognizant of the area that we're talking about because it is a well. It would be the same aquifer usually. Is that correct?
Meaning the village as well and the wells that the property owners are using?
Correct.
It is, I think, the same aquifer, and I'm looking at Steve and he's shaking his head.
Yes, okay. So for that area, they would be using the same aquifer. So I think we should, if somebody buys a property there, that we should, if they have to put in a well, obviously, then if the well goes dry, because our water goes dry, then we should be responsible for it.
All right, Dennis, you have any comments about this slide?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with most of the ones. New property or relocated ones, I'm not really sure at this particular time, but it could be what the other 2 community members want to have. But in regard to when our roads were put in where I live, Larry had me go around to the 33 neighbors and find out they wanted to have sewer and water put in before they put the road, which made sense. Out of the 33, only 5 wanted it as such. And that was because he had in there, it would cost him $45,000 to actually put that in. Oh, and by the way, did you want to put it up to your house? That's another $3,000 too, to hook it up to your house. Where if you put in another septic system, it was $20,000 from Cons per se that was offered at the time. Just general information. Nothing more.
All right.
So with that, moving on to the next slide, not really looking for much input here, but just again, just dealing with the specifics as we work through the program. The type of damage that's covered is pumps. So either the pump itself is damaged because it runs, without pumping any water through it. A lot of wells have auto shutoffs, so we don't actually anticipate that being a huge problem. And certainly for any property owner that's in the area, we would recommend an auto shutoff for that reason. We also might have to set the depth deeper. If the pump is a submersible pump that sits at the bottom, you may end up having to move that down if the water level goes down. Likewise, drilling deeper was something that was covered in the IGA, but what is not covered is any pressure or storage tanks that basically hold the water in the residence or outside the residence, as the case may be. Any issues related to that would not be covered under the escrow. And then our last slide here is just some other issues that have kind of come up. As I indicated, we are going to have a series of a couple monitoring wells within the area. The thought with respect to the escrow program is that claims would be paid only where we're able to verify within those monitoring wells that there is a problem. So just an individual person coming to you and saying, hey, my pump failed. It must be because of the well. We're going to want to be able to verify that by looking at the water levels with respect to those monitoring wells to see whether or not those have shown that decrease or not. Likewise, when the well is made, the permit, for example, that gets filed with the state talks about where the pump is, how deep it is, where what level the pump is at, where the water level is. We would obviously only pay claims where we're able to verify that was installed at a position that was below that average water level of those monitoring wells. Obviously, if they were higher than that, you know, the likelihood that their pump was going to fail anyway is much higher. And so we wouldn't cover that. Related to that, you know, we would look at getting proof of the age and depth of what's there. That's, you know, the state permits were able to verify most of that information pretty easily. If they replace their pump at some point, which I'm guessing probably most of those property owners have, given that most of these wells were put in back in the 50s and 60s, you know, they've probably replaced the pump at least once, if not multiple times. And so we just need proof of them, of when that was put in, because certainly one of the thoughts is, you know, do you put some sort of limit or proration on, you know, the age of the pump? If you've got a 20-year-old pump and the lifespan is expected to be in 10 to 15 years, you know, is it really the well's fault, our well's fault, or is it just the fact that it's an old pump? And so there's some thought that will work in some, you know, kind of proration or limitation based on the age. We're not sure what that looks like totally yet. Certainly open to any input that you folks might have on that. Likewise, we would exclude equipment that's damaged where it's just undersized for the use. You know, let's say it was an old well that was put in and then they've upgraded their home, and now they're using significantly more than it was initially projected to supply. You know, you're going to burn through that pump a lot faster. It's not an issue with the well. It's just an issue with the fact that they didn't have their well upgraded when they decided that they wanted to use more water. Thoughts of whether or not you limit claims. You know, certainly one of the thoughts is that you get one shot. You know, that if the water level goes down, we'll repair it once. But then after that, you're kind of on your own. You know, it's the risk that everybody bears at that point. Versus, you know, if for some reason they would have multiple claims related to the water levels, you know, to pay out each one of those. Full cost or partial, you know, obviously, with the number of wells that we're talking about, you know, if all of these wells went down all at the same time, you know, you're going to burn through the escrow amount pretty quickly. So there's some thoughts of, you know, do we pay the full cost or do we, you know, make it some percentage of the total cost that's as part of that. Again, open to thoughts that you have. That's just we're kind of working through that to try to determine what that looks like. And then the last one would be just, you know, if there was any circumstances where somebody might have to repay us, you know, for example, if we replace their pump and then they immediately sold the next week, you know, is there a repayment process or not? Probably not, but I've seen other programs where repayment is a condition of obtaining the funding in certain circumstances. So we throw that on the list just to see some discussion. So again, open to any comments on any of those issues.
So the pump itself, if I remember the discussion around all of this, it was a pump that failed due to a decrease in water level, not due to age or due to anything else. So I think that's the premise that we need to go on.
Mhm. But some of those don't have to be up there. Because I mean, obviously, no matter how old the pump is, even if it's 20 years old, if the water has fallen below the surface and the pump's been running for 24 hours, that's our fault. You know, it's not the fault of the people who have an old pump, you know, so I think we'd have to cover that. And I cannot see a consumer, resident having to repay us under any circumstances. What else? Yeah, so there'd be no proration on age because the pump fails because there's no water. Replace the pump, dig the well deeper or whatever. And I do think one claim per property owner, you give them a brand new pump that should last 15 to 20 years, hopefully if the water level doesn't drop significantly again. You've either lowered a pump or you've dug the well deeper at that point.
Corrected it.
So you've corrected it and over and out.
Trustee Jan Miller? No?
Water level is important, and I think that's what we're talking about. you're going to be monitoring wells? How many, what percentage? All at the same depth?
I don't remember how many monitoring wells we're gonna have. It's a handful.
We did present a contract for this to the Public Works and Highway Committee a month or so ago. And there would be 3 wells that were monitored, and they would be spread out. It's the company that, I believe WellNet was it? They're the same company that does well monitoring for Richfield. And they looked at the area that we were trying to cover to monitor water levels. They're familiar with the aquifer itself. They looked at how our well was located and selected 3 locations for monitoring that they felt would cover each one of the different areas or vectors or whatever they call it where there could be an impact. So there were 3, and I don't know the depths off the top of my head, but they were set by WellNet in their experience of how to monitor what's going on with the aquifer.
So are they digging new wells
No.
or using homeowners?
No, and we wanted to have this presentation to GGF, but they're going to be contacting those homeowners and asking to install the monitoring devices. And they're not anything that interferes with the operation of the well. I believe it's, and I can't remember if it's a laser or sound, but that it goes on top of the well and it determines the water levels that way. It's nothing that goes down into the well and interferes with anything.
So when we did a feasibility study on the wells and the water levels, I thought we monitored 5 residents.
We tested 5
Tested.
different wells when we were studying the new well, and that data was turned over to WellNet. That was part of what they looked at as well in determining where they wanted to have these monitors set.
How many square miles or square acres? How many acres are we talking about in this area?
I don't know.
It's effectively half of a section, so a section is what, Jeff? 320 acres.
320. So probably about half of 320, 160 acres.
Okay. And how many, what was that other slide? 43 wells that you know of, or?
Yeah, there's 43 wells that I was able to identify actual permits at the state with. There are 12 additional residential structures. We assume that there are wells there, obviously, because people are living there. We just weren't able to match up a permit in the state database with that particular property. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's just an archaic filing system that is not ideal. So.
I have no further questions without seeing a presentation from this well place. Monitor.
Trustee Myers.
Steve, would those be permanent for each one of those properties?
They're not permanent structures. I've seen pictures of them. They're a piece of equipment that goes on the top of the well. It could be removed. It could stay for the life of, as the village attorney pointed out, the escrow is by the IGA expires when the tax increment district closes. And, again, that's probably somewhere in the range of 15 and 20 to 20 years. So the village could maintain some sort of monitoring system after that, but my guess is that probably if something hasn't happened in 15 years, there'd be no need to continue to monitor.
That's why I asked in regard to the amount of time, if they're going to stay there as such. If they stay there through the 15 to 20 years, that's fine. That's what they do in Richfield, and they check that every year per se for all the residents. So I'd like to see that administration make a determination as to a permanent or a one-time shot just to see what it is to start off with, so they have a base in regard to it. In regard to the other items that was presented as such, I agree with the other ones in regard to that aspect. But in regard to the limit of one-time claim, if they don't have any water and the other levels were the same when the first one went out, and they have the same problem because the water went down lower again, I don't think they should put another one if it's our fault. But here again, that has to be determined as such. But just to put it down as a statement, I think I'm not in favor of that. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Anything else? All right, any other slides or was that?
Nope, that was it. So.
Okay. Yeah, trustee Myers.
Are we going to put a limit? Is this committee going to put a limit on what we're going to be offering, please?
I think this is just preliminary right now, and we need to know a little bit more of what that contract is going to look, or I'm sorry, not contract, but what the escrow is going to look like. We'll have more meetings about this for sure as we refine.
And as we said, I mean, it's the well goes online in about a year, so you know, there's time to finesse this still, but obviously we wanted to get ahead of it to make sure that it was in place soon enough that you know, we had some of the monitoring data before the well went online, and just, you know, so that the property owners knew what the ground rules were going to be. So.
My question was, is this committee going to make the decision when it comes? That was my question. I'm sorry if I make that clear.
I mean, as part of the IGA, I would think it would have to go to village board, wouldn't it, for final approval?
Yeah, that was certainly my plan was ultimately this will go to the full village board for approval with whatever it looks like, but with this committee kind of guiding the preliminary steps.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
All right, thank you very much. All right, item C, 2024 department budget requests. And for this, we'll have Matthew Uselding present. There are 3 sub-items under this: Community Development Department, General Public Library, I'm sorry, Germantown Public Library, and the Park and Rec Department.
Good evening, committee. So the first requested budget we're going to take a look at is the inspection services budget. Now, this budget is largely comprised of inspections that Safe Built does on the village's behalf. Looking at their expenses, you can see that salaries and fringe benefits are a minor portion of what's allocated to this department. The majority of operating expenses from this budget is due to our contract with Safe Built, where they get a percentage of all building permits and other types of permits that the village's issues. In the 2024 requested budget, of that $427,000 for operating supplies and expenses, $410,000 is allocated towards the Safe Built contract, which is down in previous years. The reason that it is down is we are projecting less development activity in 2024 than 2023. So as building permit revenues decrease, so does the expense side due to our contract with Safe Built.
Committee, any questions? Trustee Jan Miller.
Safe Built, we have contracts with other entities that are a cost and expense. So when will we review the contracts? We usually see a contract page on a quarterly basis. That's what GGF used to see, right? Am I right? Okay. So.
Correct. So after speaking with the village administrator, I think the plan is, at least from a staffing level, is to come back to the village board later at the end of 2023 to look over and approve or deny, I guess, all village contracts that the village has. There's a variety of contracts, you know, that range to hundreds of thousands of dollars, that and down all the way down to, you know, $4,000, $8,000. The intent is, as we're live with Munis, we're able to better track those in a financial report and to present that to GGF and eventually the village board for approval.
Okay, but GGF will get review of that
Correct.
to move it forward. Okay.
Correct.
So, and like November, are we talking about?
It'll be late November, early December.
How can we impact the budget if we review it so late? Doesn't the budget have to be done by late November, early December?
So the budget hearing is on November 20th. So essentially what staff is planning to do is bring forward the current contracts that the village has, and then have them be reviewed by GGF. And if GGF or the village board would like, certain contracts to go out for bid or do an RFP process for certain projects, then that would be presented at that time. Currently, it's too early to go out for bids or RFPs for, projects at the end of 2024 or the beginning or in the middle of 2024. So that is why at the end of 2023, we're planning on presenting all contracts that the village has to GGF and ultimately the village board.
So we'll see them before November 20th.
You likely will not see them before November 20th.
So why, it's not going to impact the budget when it obviously costs us a lot?
So if you think about the process of approving contracts come before GGF or Public Works or Public Safety all throughout the year. Those are budgeted projects. We estimate the cost of projects, and then we go out for bid or have a contract with a certain vendor. And then if that contract is over a certain dollar threshold, it has to go to GGF and ultimately to the village board. So this year, what we're going to do is we're going to try to get some of those contracts that we know are going to be coming sometime in 2024 and get them ahead, get ahead of schedule and present to them to the village board before 2024. That is the intent of staff.
Yeah, Jeff, when does the contract expire with Safe Build?
Safe Build.
That's a multi-year, isn't it?
It's actually a auto renewing annual with a 60-day
Oh.
notification, so arguably it's a 60-day contract. But I know Matthew's been hesitant to say what I'm going to say because it hasn't been finalized yet, but we are negotiating with Safe Build right now, and we're trying to get what currently is the percentage split of the fee structure adjusted in our favor. And Steve, can I say what that is? Yeah, right now the split is 62-38, 62% Safe Build, 38% the Village of Germantown. Right now we've got a verbal agreement to reduce that to 55-45, so a 7% increase in our favor, and we are working further on adjusting that more as we can.
Right.
Chairman,
Trustee Kaminsky.
don't go away. Is it appropriate for me to ask a question about that contract at this time?
Sure.
Okay.
Budget.
In your view, is it still more cost effective for us to use them as opposed to hiring inspectors like we did way back when? I remember when we went to this system, it made all the sense in the world and it saved us money. Are we still pretty good on that, or is it something we need to look at again?
Well, as I mentioned, we are looking and we're negotiating that more and more in our favor, and that's the intention. If at some point we feel that we're not in a favorable position, then we're going to seriously look at making a change back to the system we had before. The one thing that I try not to look past is the improvement in the quality of service that we received with Safe Build. I mean, it truly is head and shoulders above what we had just before we brought them on board. So that's a key element of the contract and the service they provide.
Trustee Jan Miller.
I have another question for you, Jeff, on this. That sounds like a great start with the contract, getting more for the Village of Germantown. So it's my understanding, I've only been back there a couple of times because I'm not looking for permits. But when I've gone up there, it looks like they have space. It looks like they have a counter, they have space, they live there. Is that right?
Their staff resides here at Village Hall, which is
Okay.
another benefit of having them here in-house. We have a permit technician that can respond to application procedural questions. And we have our full-time inspector who has office hours. both in the morning and in the afternoon. And there's actually a third person that administers our contract as well as others and helps organize bringing in inspectors from other areas to fill gaps. Like, for example, our full-time inspector, Alan, was on vacation. He'll be back tomorrow. He was out today, so we needed some inspection service from another area in the regional area from Safe Build. And
Okay.
that person coordinates that.
Okay. And then, is it true that they also service not only the village of Germantown, but a region or other municipalities?
Safe Build serves quite a number of communities in southeastern Wisconsin.
Okay.
As I mentioned, our inspector, Alan, we have a full-time
Okay.
inspector, and as needed, we get services from other Safe Build inspectors that are housed in other locations, commercial electrical, when Alan's on vacation, things of that nature. So it's a very flexible program that they have that benefits us and presumably the other communities that they work for.
Okay. So they have other locations. Do we charge them rent?
No, that's included in our contract to provide space for them. And as Matt pointed out, when business is good and we're issuing a lot of permits, obviously the revenue is up and their share goes up. When business is bad and the permit revenue goes down, what we pay them goes down.
Mhm. I made that comment because rental spaces, if you tried to rent an apartment, everything's going up. So no, they don't work only for us.
The people,
The one, when they're in our office, they're working for us.
yes.
They're not working for anybody else.
Yes, our contractual arrangement is that we provide office space for their staff that provides us service. If you want us to look into charging them rent, I suppose we could do that, but I don't think that's necessary.
All right,
Thank you.
thanks.
The next budget request we'll be looking at is the planning and zoning budget request. This makes up most of the community development staff that the village has. You see a majority of their salaries and benefits are located within the planning and zoning requested budget. Under the operating supplies and expense, you'll see a slight increase over the 2023 requested budget. That is due to the fact that we are required to do a housing affordability study in 2024. We were actually given a waiver in 2020 by the DOR, and now it is time that we have to do that project, and that costs roughly $20,000. In addition, on the revenue side, you'll see, much like in the inspection services, you'll see a decrease in revenue based on an estimation of decreased projected development activity.
Committee, any questions on this one? Yeah, trustee Jan Miller.
We just contracted with the Tracy Cross. Is that the $20,000?
Pass it over to our community development director.
No, that is not. That is for a residential market analysis related to the next generation housing, and that money is coming from Washington County to pay that particular consultant for those services.
The money will come from Washington County, but we have to pay for it and they'll pay us back, Washington County.
Yeah, it's a
Pays us
reimbursement
back, right.
arrangement, yes.
They kept saying that the residential, the study was not necessarily for next generation housing, but that's included. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, because the money is coming from the Next Generation Housing Fund for Washington County, I believe it's imperative that we include a portion of the study to examine the suitability, the viability, and the demand for housing that fits under the criteria of the Next Generation Housing Program. To our benefit, however, they'll be looking at a wide variety of housing alternatives, ownership, rental, single family, multifamily, and the whole market, and give us a snapshot of what we can expect in terms of demand over the next 10 to 15 years. So I'm looking forward to the results.
And then the housing availability is just what's currently on the market? Is that what we're,
I don't know the definition for
Okay.
that.
Matt, do you know?
I do not.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then who is the salary and wages in this planning and zoning?
It is allocated for the community development director, the associate planner, the planning assistant. And I believe
And that's it.
that is it. Is that it?
Mhm.
And is this a year that you're going to be looking for an associate planner?
Yes, in fact, we hope to fill that position by the end of the year.
That's all I had.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Anyone else? We'll move on.
Thank you.
Looking at the library's 2024 requested budget, a large majority of the library's budget is made up of salary and benefits. The library has several full-time staff as well as a multitude of part-time staff that account for those salaries and wages. You'll see an increase in the fringe benefits. That is due to a health insurance change. Someone who previously wasn't on health insurance now coming on to the village health insurance. That is why you see such a large increase in fringe benefits. On the operating supplies and expense side, one of the larger expenses for the library, as you can imagine, are books. They budget roughly $60,000 for new book purchases every year. On the revenue side, you'll see an increase in county revenue. I'm not an expert in library revenues, so the library director can correct me if I'm wrong. That increase is due to the amount of activity that's been in the library, more resident and outside members of different communities coming to the library drives up that county shared revenue.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the county revenue is based specifically off of non-library usage. So Richfield and Jackson primarily.
Got it. So that increased. I mean, we're gonna see revenue increase of 30,000 because of that, because of non-residential.
If we keep increasing the rate we are,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that's great.
What was that?
Jackson never gets a library.
That would change the funding structure. Our usage that we see is actually, Jackson, we see some, but because of West Bend and where we're located, we see the most from Richfield,
Sure.
just in the school districts and based on
Schools.
demographics. Yep. Mhm.
Interest rate, this is a question that I have and maybe others have it. Is it only for communities without libraries in Washington County, or does it include surrounding counties as well?
The Washington County revenue is only for Washington County. We do have Act 420, which is a system set up for adjacent counties. We only receive about 6,000 from there. So that's included in the county, the lines. So that's looking at like Waukesha County, Ozaki. So we don't see much of that because our on our borders, those counties are very well developed as far as libraries go. So there's not a lot of non-library people that come to Germantown.
Trustee Jan Miller, did you have a comment, question?
Yes. So the intergovernmental revenues that went up 30,000, is that the final number that you got?
Yes, we're on a much better funding calendar now. So we base those numbers based on the last previous full year. So those numbers are actually based on 2022 data, which allows us to better budget for that number. Because previously we were going quarter by quarter. So it was very difficult to budget based on usage. So this is the first complete year that we are on that system with the county so that we're able to know those numbers, put those on our budget, and better able to budget.
Is this the intergovernmental revenue that you were waiting for? for the formula?
No, that's a different number.
Okay. Does that show up on any of this budget at all?
No, that would be our minimum requirement from the village in order to exempt from the Washington County tax.
Okay.
So I do have that number. It's not part of the budget because we just have to meet the minimum, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Trustee Myers.
Are you getting less money in 2024 between the county and Germantown?
We are getting 30,000 more from the county.
Thank you.
The requested budget, we are getting the one that's presented at this meeting. It is an increase of about $73,000 that we're requesting.
Thank you.
Trustee Jan Miller.
And I noticed on your budget, salaries and wages, the percent change is 5%. And inspection services and planning and zoning, we had 10 and 11. So is that covering everything you need?
The 5%, yes, that would cover being fully staffed. And the reason why it's a little more than the 2% is because we had some unfilled positions after COVID. We were not able to hire some positions due to the job market and safety of the building. So we were struggling last year to fill those positions, but now we are fully staffed.
That's great news. And what percentage of your staff is part-time?
We have 25 staff total, 5 are full-time, 15 are what we consider permanent full-time. So that's between like 20 to 28 hours a week. And then we have 5, what we consider like more seasonal part-time. Those work all year round, but there are primarily our high school workers that work slight hours. So we kind of have 3 different groups.
Yeah, so 20 to 28 in some areas would be considered part-time.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further questions for Trish? No? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before you is the 2024 requested budget for the Recreation Department. Much like other departments, salaries and benefits make up a large portion of the recreation budget. The Recreation Department has several full-time staff and a rather large budget for part-time staff. These folks usually include kids club workers and other things that the village Recreation Department funds. On the operating supplies and expense side, you'll see that it's roughly $438,000. Almost half of that is for program supplies and expenses. This is where if the recreation, has a program where they're hiring, a basketball coach or a hula hoop instructor, those expenses come out of the program supplies and expense budget line item. One thing we're doing differently in 2024 than 2023 is once you get the detailed line item budget, you'll see an additional line for music at the pavilion. What we're going to do in 2024 is pull those expenses out so we can better track the expenses and revenues related to the music at the pavilion program. On the capital items, the recommended or the requested budget is requesting $60,000 to improve the Altbauer tennis courts. On the revenue side, revenues are projected to stay relatively flat for the Recreation Department based on the 2023 budget. On the capital side, there was a request for some money to fix the plumbing fixtures at Kinderberg Park, specifically the ladies' restroom.
Gil, what are we looking at that you handed us here? You
All
can
right,
explain a little bit.
Yes, I'm coming to you to request that we were asked to eliminate $45,000 out of our part-time salaries account. I gave you an accounting of $28,000 that we feel that we can cut and live with somewhat, but the $17,000 we're hoping to be able to keep. If we lose that, a lot of that is our contract employees that provide music lessons, dance lessons, various other lessons that do generate revenue for the department. Also, one of your questions you may ask is about cutting programs. I have a list here since 2021. We've cut out 46 programs altogether since 2021. So we do evaluate each of our programs and we look at them and we try to cut those that are not generating revenue or losing revenue. So the $17,000, I'm asking if we can keep into the budget, and you can see where we are willing to cut. Program supplies and expense account, we were asked to cut 19,000. As you can see in here, we've looked inside and we feel like we can cut 12,000 and would like to be able to keep the 7,000. Again, a lot of that will go to paying for a contract teachers and instructors that teach our programs. I did agree to go ahead and cut the 60,000 for the Altbauer tennis courts for the year, delaying that for another year for to improve the courts itself. So if you cut the tennis court 60,000, the part-time salaries 28,000, and the program and supplies 12,000, you're still looking at $100,000 cut from Parks and Recreation. However, we are still required or asked to generate the same revenues we have, if not increase them.
So the tennis courts, is that part of the regular capital, not a Fund 40?
That was allocated,
Borrowed?
that was non-borrowed capital project, correct?
Tennis court, that was the basketball court there, right? A few years ago, that thing is like beautiful. But the tennis courts weren't completed at that time?
The last time the tennis courts were worked on was approximately 7 years ago at Altbauer.
Okay.
This last year, we did spend 60-something thousand. We improved the Kinderberg courts, but the Altbauer courts are in pretty bad shape. But in the reality of it, have to look at comparing to losing 17,000 in personnel and 12,000 in expenses. We can live with that.
Okay. Committee. Trustee Jan Miller.
Well, we certainly appreciate getting the plumbing fixtures at Kinderberg Park. Thank you.
That's up to y'all. Yeah.
It's a woman thing. All right. So if we are asking the Park and Recreation Department to keep your revenues at, are your revenues 1.2 million?
The combination of all the types of revenues are at 1.2 million. About 1.15 is for recreation programs. Another 45, I think, is for facility rentals. I don't have the other line items in front of me.
The lion's share. Okay,
The
let's
lion's
go.
share is for rec programs.
1.1. I guess you'd have to be a magician to make the same amount of revenue with less people. So how are you going to do that?
Well, as a staff, we've talked about if we eliminate some of these programs, that may allow us more time to develop sponsorships and donors out there. So we are already working on a marketing plan to try to appeal to more businesses in Germantown to work with us and help us out.
That's great. What about grants and grants? Working on too?
With the, hopefully with the completion of the trail strategic plan that we hope to build off of. If, for example, I put in 100,000 for capital improvement, I should be able to get grants that will raise that 100,000 to 500,000 for trail development. So I have that in the budget for the next 5 years. So yes, we'll be going after grants for trail improvement and hopefully start building a few.
Sounds good.
Administrator Krecklo, did you have a comment?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I just wanted to interject real quickly that we do have the committee of the whole meetings that will be scheduled as well. And these are important issues, and there's a lot of important questions for the board, and I'm sure that the board will have as well. Kind of the timing was a little bit awkward tonight. The intent was just for the departments to kind of present a brief overview of their budgets, and we do have a board meeting that we're past. I don't mean to tell the committee it's your committee. You can go as long as you'd like, but just wanted to point out that we will have committee of the whole meetings that'll be dedicated to answering the questions and getting more in depth that the trustees would like.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
How do you want to proceed?
Go to the next one.
Questions, just let them.
If you have a question on Park and Rec or comment,
In regard to the other ones,
We only have one
Thoughts?
more.
just have Matthew just present it and then no questions.
well, this is the last one for
Seniors.
budgeting, right?
Yep, it's just the senior center.
Oh, senior center, thanks.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's go through that real quick.
So the senior center budget is one of the smaller budgets that the village has, or smaller departments that the village has. The salaries and benefits make up roughly 60% of the budget. I believe there's one full-time staff member at the senior center and a couple part-time staff assistants that help manage the day-to-day operations of the senior center. The largest expense and revenue for the senior center are the senior trips. I believe there are several planned throughout the year for different activities that resident seniors can sign up for. There are no major changes to the senior center budget.
Great. Committee, any questions, comments about the senior center? All right, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
With that, we'll move on to reports. We have the accounts payable reports that are in your packet. Distribution journals. Any questions or comments? Trustee Myers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go over these separately with Matthew from 135 to 141 at a different date other than tonight. I can get that information from him. Otherwise, I don't have anything.
Okay. That's good. Anyone else? Trustee Jan Miller.
I had a lot of questions as well, and I can certainly get with Matthew as well. However, I was wondering, can we get these APs? We used to get these sent to us on like a Monday every week, weekly.
The distribution journals?
Yeah.
Yes, you can have those sent. I think in the past, after every Friday typically is when we cut checks. And
But
I think they
that's
were
what it
typically sent
was.
out
Yeah.
either that day or the following Monday. If you'd like them every Monday, we can certainly start sending them out
I'd
again.
appreciate that.
Yep.
It's a little much.
Me too.
Everyone, or the, I used to get it as a village board member.
Right. That is true. It was distributed to all
It
the
was
board
the
members.
distributed to everyone.
Right, and with that, budget to actual, the same thing? Yeah, hold off on that?
I will ask my questions independently.
Okay.
And just to make a point, for the water utility, you will see a difference in revenues and expenses. A large majority of that is depreciation is calculated as an expenditure. That's not a real loss that the water utility has. That is a calculation based on the age of the assets. So historically, the depreciation is calculated around $1 million. What that number accounts for is saying, the village has X amount of assets. Each year, they're depreciating in value. That number is calculated based on the depreciation of those assets, and that's roughly $950,000. In addition, you'll see on the expense side that there is $750,000 allocated for the painting of the water tower on Mequon Road. That project is expected to be funded through fund balance. So that is the natural loss you'll see between the revenues and expenditures. Each year, the village has been putting roughly $80,000 to $85,000 aside to fund that project. So each year, you'll see You saw it in the 23 budget, you likely saw it in the 22 budget, an expense of $750,000 that hasn't been expended yet because that project is not completed. So that is why you see such a large gap between the projected revenues and the projected expenses. And I'd be happy to talk with any of you one-on-one to explain that a little better.
Next meeting.
All right, thank you. Last thing we have is the IT quarterly report.
There's not very much update on this, actually. The most updated item on here is that we're doing a little more asset management in our IT structure.
That is short.
But it's just a good overview of what we've gone through since the beginning with capital
Yeah,
data.
as part of our packet, we do have
Yep.
a sheet that explains a little bit more. All right, thank you. With that, oh yeah, trustee Jim Miller.
Aaron, are we on, there are no dates on this. Are we on track for what we're trying to get accomplished?
Yes, most of our main projects are completed. We have a couple projects that are set for next, that we're hoping to get done next year.
2024, okay.
Yep, but besides that, yes, we're on track. All of our main projects are done. And now it's the smaller, more organizational process projects that we're completing.
And didn't we discuss in one of our meetings, could it be GGF or village board, about an IT IT person, 50-50, 20 or something like that, 40-40, 20?
There has been some discussion about that, yes, and what
Okay,
that's going to
I'll
look
put-
like.
I'll put that on a meeting. Thank you.
Okay, that finishes all items on our agenda except for the next scheduled meeting. Our next scheduled meeting would typically take place on October 16th. I would start it again at 5:30. I think we got a little bit lengthy on the budgets, but it's also an important part of this. There has been some questions about our lengthiness of our meetings and having it on the same night. Personally, I like stacking meetings and having it at the same night. I want to be mindful of staff and of my time as well. I mean, I don't have many free nights. So if I can have all of mine on the same night, I prefer it. I know that there's other opinions here and I'd love to hear them.
Stacking is good for me.
I would agree. Whatever you want is good.
We'll line them up.
I
Retired.
Put your mic on. I don't mind stacking, but could it be stacked on another stackable night? Like a Wednesday? I know you have a Wednesday, don't you, usually, sometimes? But once a month, right? This is once a month?
That is the point.
It's an option. I'm throwing it out there.
Think about it. I would prefer to do October on the 16th at 5:30. I'll start at 5:30 again. I think that works well
Okay.
and see how it goes. And just keep monitoring it at this point.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right, great. October 16th, 2023 at 5:30. Thank you. And with that, we will adjourn. The village board meeting will start momentarily.